Expo 67 Revisited, Expo 67 Revisited, David Burt.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. About 40 years ago, I had to do a speech in high school. And I remember doing it on Expo 67. It was Canada's World Fair to celebrate its 100th birthday. Now, while trying to come up with a topic for tonight's speech, I was sitting in my car and I was just, what if I redid that speech? So I decided, okay, I would research it. My father worked at Expo 67 and was given this book as a gift, an appreciation for and it's called This Was Expo. I didn't know where the book had gone because my father had passed away many years ago. So I sent an email to all my family members, and sure enough, my oldest brother had it. So I did most of my research, and between that and Google, because we didn't have it, which called back then, so between that and Google, I researched it again. Now, the idea of hosting the 1967 World Exposition dates back to 1956, but it was back in 1958 that Conservative Senator Mark Druin suggested that Canada should host a World Exposition to celebrate its centennial. But it almost didn't happen, because that same year, Russia was celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they wanted to host it. So there could not be two World Fairs in the same year. So it went to the Bureau of International Expositions. And actually Moscow had actually won, and they were awarded to host it. But they actually backed out due to financial burden. So it went back to the Bureau, and on November 13th, 1962, the Bureau awarded it back to Canada. Now, several sites were proposed as the main expo grounds, but it was the mayor of Montreal, Drapeau, idea was to create new islands in the St. Lawrence River and to enlarge the existing St. Helens Island. And construction started on August the 13th, 1963, when 25 million tons of fill was poured into the St. Lawrence River. The original budget to build it was $167 million, but the actual cost was $439 million. Now, to give you perspective, that would be $3.1 billion in 2016 dollars. The theme for the fair was Man and His World. It featured 90 pavilions representing Man and His World themes. There were 67 nations participating, and each country had a pavilion, as well as several corporate and private pavilions. Now, when you came into the grounds on Expo, you were given a passport. And the idea was, okay, when you went into each pavilion, they would stamp it, just like they do on a real passport. And so the big thing was to get as many stamps in your passport as possible. That's one thing that I do remember. I was only 7 years old, so I don't remember too much of it, but that's one thing I do remember, is how many stamps you would get on your passport. The most popular pavilion was the Russian pavilion. They had 13 million visits, followed by the Canadian pavilion, which had 11, and the Americans had 9 million. Now, if you've ever been to Montreal and ever seen this site where Expo was held, that big globe that is still standing today was the American pavilion. It's still there today, and even though there was a fire that pretty much gutted it in 1976. In the American pavilion, there were 6 levels of exhibits connected by elevators. and they were based on the theme Creative America, the positive use of creative energy. The exhibits included some American folk art, an Elvis Presley guitar, and NASA's Apollo space capsule, and lunar excursion module. Now bear in mind, we hadn't gone to the moon yet, so. And in the Canadian pavilion, it was an inverted pyramid called a Katanavik, which is an Inuit word for gathering place. And the major attractions was the building included a rotating cinema. One of the corporate pavilions was the Bell Telephone Pavilion. Now, oddly enough, this is one pavilion I do remember. As you went into a building, and in the center it was empty, and all around you was a movie screen. And you were center stage while the RCMP musical ride was going on around you. It gave you the feeling like you were in the middle of it. I guess it was the old version of virtual reality. If you've ever seen the RCMP musical ride, it's a beautiful spectacle with the RCMPs in their uniforms and their horses. It gives me the chills every time I see it, as I'm so proud to be a Canadian. There was several other private pavilions, even Boy Scouts had a pavilion. Now, there was one other part of Expo, the amusement park called La Ronde. It's still there today. I don't remember it, but I was talking to my brother, and he spent all of his summer there. Expo 67 closed on Sunday, October 29, 67. On the final day, 221,554 visitors added to the more 50 million that attended Expo, at the time when Canada only was 20 million people. And the world had seen it as a huge success. That was Canada's 100th birthday celebration. I wonder what they'll do for the 200th birthday. Thank you very much.